there is something to the fact that we all come from a different perspective and we're all looking at things through a different lens.
Yeah.
And so if we can, at the very least, give people the benefit of, all right, this is your truth from your perspective.
Yeah.
I can at least try to meet you there and understand where you're coming from.
Welcome to the That's Where I'm At podcast. I'm Laura, happily divorced after spending years with a narcissist. I believe keeping secrets will make you sick and that they always come to light in the end. As women, we're often told to be quiet, don't share your story, don't talk about the things we go through. It's making women sick, sad, and suicidal. We don't have to be on the other side to share our story. This show is for the women still in the middle of the mess, but showing up bravely as they heal. It's time to share these stories with each other so we can learn, grow, and heal together. I'm Laura, and that's where I'm at. Please take note that this episode may contain subjects that may be triggering to certain listeners. Please take care when listening today. Hi, guys, and welcome back to the That's Where I'm At podcast. Today I have Jennifer. Jennifer is an avid traveler, a lover and collector of stories, and the host of the podcast, The Human Experience, a platform that seeks to elevate stories, empower the storyteller, and invite the listener into a place of validation, understanding, and compassion. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. That sounds great. what you're doing on your podcast. No, it really does, because did you struggle not feeling validated along the way somewhere, and you were like, I gotta help people feel validated? Because I sure did, and that's sort of why I started mine too. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I've been doing the Human Experience for a little over a year. I'm sorry, it's been published for a little over a year, but I've been collecting interviews for a couple of years. And I got started because I went through my own experience with domestic violence, and I got out of my abusive marriage. And I'm pretty well past that in terms of time, but so I didn't start it right away after going through that. But that lived with me for so long, the experience of that. And I had never felt more misunderstood in my life than when I was walking through my divorce and trying to get people to understand where I was coming from and what I was going through and how I was feeling. So, I had the fantastic support of some beautiful women who really listened to me and validated what I was going through. And it just became such an important part of listening and storytelling for me.
I love that. I'm so thankful for those friends that I've had that are really good listeners, but also the ones that just they didn't have the capacity to do that, as and so I learned from that as well, learning how I need to be a really good listener, or I need to find the people who will listen, because that's important. And that's hard for a lot of us, to find those good, safe friends, right? We might be in cultures or in circles that don't feel safe. Were some of your friends sharing their past experiences of getting divorced or leaving an abusive marriage or anything like that?
I have a lot of family members and some friends that have gotten divorced after I did. But I was largely alone in that particular experience.
Okay.
But what I did have was women that were there to listen and to support my decisions, regardless of whether or not they had that personal experience. Because what they gave me was their trust that, they knew who I was before this, and that this isn't something that I would lie about or that I would make up for whatever the reasons people think people make this stuff up for, which is just so ridiculous.
It is.
Nobody wants to walk through this voluntarily.
No.
So, I had I had people, and one of them was my therapist, to be honest. One of them was my therapist that just really,
Wow.
when you're going through domestic violence, everything in your world is turned upside down, and
Mm-hmm.
you are truly just at this place where you're questioning everything about yourself, everything you think you know, because you're basically being told that it's opposite day all of the time, right?
Right.
If you say up, he says down. If you
Yes.
say left, he says right. And so you really do start to question
Mm.
every minor decision that you make.
Yeah.
Am I doing this right? Is he going to be upset? And so you are then in this, your brain is in this practice of questioning everything. And so when I left my marriage, that's where I was.
Yeah.
Everything seemed like the biggest decision. And how was I supposed to make these decisions when I didn't know
Yeah.
who I was, where I was, what I was doing? And so that validation really helped with confidence. And, one of the things that is a touch point for my podcast is that everybody deserves to tell their own story from their own perspective in their own voice.
Yes.
So, that saying that there's like three versions of a story, is yours, mine, and the truth,
Okay.
right? So, I think that can be a little skewed,
Yeah.
and I understand that, but there is something to the fact that we all come from a different perspective and we're all looking at things through a different lens.
Yeah.
And so if we can, at the very least, give people the benefit of, all right, this is your truth from your perspective,
Yeah.
I can at least try to meet you there and understand where you're coming from.
That was the hardest thing. The most surprising thing to me was the people who were like, "Are you sure that's how it happened?" Especially with, yeah, I went through, my ex is a covert narcissist. And so he wasn't out in the open. I was the only one being abused, sort of my kids, as far as, demands and stuff like that. But I didn't have black eyes or anything like that. And so it was hard to explain it to people. I barely understood it. Like when I figured it out, I was like, I was abused. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
it's wild because look, I'm 57. And so growing up, if you weren't being hit, you weren't in an abusive marriage.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's definitely still the rhetoric in some places. And I know I have a friend who was leaving her husband, ex, I don't know what he is. And the pastor of her church was like, well, you don't have grounds for divorce. And she's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
leaving anyway, because what was happening to her is abuse. But there's that rhetoric that you have to, I did the stay and pray thing for so long, it's so exhausting. And so it was hard to explain to people, like, because I was with him for 33 years. And so, oh, he was mean to me. That's what people want to boil it down to, right? Oh, he
Mm.
was mean. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't understand. This is psychological abuse constantly for 33 years, every day, all the time, every single thing. And it's kind of exhausting. And so it's hard when you have to explain it, right? When you have to try and explain, and then to have people who are unsafe saying, like, are you sure that's what happened? Are you
Yeah.
sure that's how he meant it? That was the biggest surprise to me, I have to say. That was the biggest surprise. And so your therapist, you were saying she didn't quite believe you, or she didn't think it was that big
No,
a deal?
she validated me.
Oh,
She
okay,
was one of my
great.
biggest
Oh,
validators.
okay, good.
And actually, between my therapist and my mom, they were my two biggest,
That's
and my
great.
best friend. And like for years afterwards, I would struggle with, did I do the right thing? Was I making it up in my head? Because you get far enough away from it that
Yeah,
some of the like impression of it isn't as in your face, right? Like you
right,
start to heal and you start to move past it, and it's not in your face every day anymore. And so
right,
then you start to think, did I make that up?
right.
And then my best friend would frequently, like, she had a list of things that she would pull out.
Okay.
Remember when he did this? Remember
Okay.
when he did this? Remember? Yeah, you made the right decision. So,
Yes.
you know, it's hard. It's a very difficult thing to walk through, as you well know,
Yeah.
because it stays with you. It is not a singular event. And
Right.
we know that with any trauma, right? And
Right.
so So the way that it affects people is different. And so when I say, like, you deserve to tell your story from your point of view,
Yeah.
I may not have had the same experience or
Right.
dealt with it the same way that you have.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that yours is wrong or mine is wrong.
Right.
It's just how we're coping and how we're dealing. So yeah, I think validation is a huge, huge part of storytelling.
Yeah.
And, nobody's asking you to validate bad behavior. I feel like that's the that's the thing. It
Yes.
immediately goes to, why would I validate? Nobody's asking you to do that. And most people aren't trying to tell stories where they're the bad guy. I struggle because domestic violence is such a thing that there really is a black and white to it in terms of what was wrong and what was right.
Yeah.
But again, the nuances of where people are coming from and what they've experienced and how it played out for them, how they left, why they stayed, that is all gray. And we cannot sit here in judgment of people that haven't, especially victims that have not figured out where they are in the process or how to get to the next point. So,
well, that's the thing is why I wanted to talk to people, because I felt very alone at the beginning. I was just like, I don't think anyone else has gone through this. And then I started talking about it. And then all of a sudden people started telling me, I've gone through it. This happened to me. And what that did, you're right. We're not trying to sensationalize the abuse or any of those things. And it's really not even to throw anybody under the bus. It's to show people that you're not alone, that this does happens to, look, I had a lot of people going, oh, you guys had a great life. I'm like, I curated quite the life for us. You know what I mean? Because behind the scenes, I did not even want to be alive. My really good friends know that. I didn't even want to be alive because of the abuse. And that's the thing that I wanted people to understand, that it's not just, okay, well, we're done, because I thought we were having irreconcilable differences. And then I started to see things. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
yes.
And that's why I want people to understand the warning signs, how to heal from it, all those things, and that it is a trauma, that it is abuse, all these things, so that people can understand you're not alone and you're going to get better. Because I can't believe where I'm at now compared to where I was just 18 months ago. I didn't think I was going to survive it. I really didn't. And now I'm like, I'm living my life and I'm very happy and I'm helping other people so that they don't have to go through it. But I don't want anybody to think that they're alone, because I know there's people going through it right now. There's people going through it today that are finding out whatever the issue is in their marriage. And it breaks my heart, but that's what I've continued to do. And I'm glad that you're talking about all different kinds of things on your podcast, because it's so important to give our perspective, like you said, from our story. And you might get a nugget. Somebody might get a nugget, right? And say like, oh yeah, that happened to me. And so you're not going to feel alone. There's something about that. Look, there is healing in that community. Even if it's a sucky community like this, there's healing in that, and there's healing in having conversations. Because one of my friends added that on. She said, you got to have the conversations. That's why you got to find your safe people and all that. And so you said it'd been a while since you got divorced and then you started your podcast. Like, what made you like wait that time and whatever before you did?
I really was trying to figure out who I was again. And so when I got married, I was in my early 20s. I grew up in conservative Christian community, went to Christian school my whole life, and none of that was inherently bad. I'm very grateful for my parents and the childhood that they gave me. It was lovely, but it was very sheltered. And there were rules set forth by, being in Christian community. And I played by all of the rules. I did not break them. And so in my mind, and I wouldn't have put it in exactly these words, but in my mind, I had done all of the right things. And so what I was going to get out of that was a good marriage and a good life. And it happened pretty immediately after we got married. After we got back from our honeymoon, things changed immediately.
Oh my gosh.
And so in that way, I do feel fortunate because I got out very quickly out of my marriage, but the damage had been done.
Yeah.
And so now I knew something that I had not ever known before, and I couldn't unknow it. And so when I left, I felt this very intense loss. And, there's the loss that comes with divorce in general, but then there was the loss of self, where I was like, I don't know who I am anymore, and I don't know what to believe because I did the right thing.
Right.
I checked all the right boxes, and
Yes.
here I am in a situation I never thought I would be in for multiple reasons.
I wanted to add one more thing on one of the things that made me sad was the loss of my future, because I was I was building a future with this person. I had spent I mean, I've been with him since I was 22 or something, and so I'm building this future, and then I'm like, now he's off with somebody else. And my friend said, you did not build a future. You were building a lie with him, because he was lying to you the whole time. And as hard as that is to talk about, and I'm going to do an episode on it, it's so hard to think about, but it's true, because they're lying. Many times mine was a narcissist, so he was lying and he was future faking forever. You know what I mean? And saying, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this. We're going to have the best life. And then he was all, you're not following the rules anymore. You got to get out. It's I could laugh about it now, but
good for you. I mean, and that's super interesting that he said get out, because the narcissists are so like, but it had been a lot of years for you too.
Yeah, but he did the reverse discard. I actually was the one who asked for the divorce, but he was the one who was like, are we going to just do this forever? Like this terrible life kind of thing. And I was all, no, I'm done. So
that is my cue.
I was going to say, yes, I was very proud of myself, because listen, I can freely admit I would have stayed forever, thinking I can just convince him one more day to be better, and that I'll be better, and that things will work out. I mean, seriously, I just like somebody had to knock me upside the head. Now I finally have clarity. And so, but I did have the reverse discard, because no, they're not going to leave. Most of the time, narcissists won't leave because they have to play the victim. And so, yes, he gets to tell everyone that Laura got, wanted a divorce. And oh my gosh, yeah, okay, whatever, but it's true. I think that's really interesting. You're not the only one that I've talked to about checking all the right boxes, checking all the boxes, doing all the right things. I did the things I was supposed to do. Now, do you think, looking back, that you saw red flags that you ignored, or were you were so young?
I think it was a combination. Like, looking back now, I do see red flags, but I don't necessarily think I would have known
Me too.
to even be looking for them at that time. I mean, so the mark of our relationship being bad, and this is textbook. I mean, it is a red flag.
Yeah.
But at 20, I never would have been able to tell you that, because our relationship was too good, it was too good to be true. And I'm just like, no, this is just me meeting the person. Like, yes. Like, this is what's supposed to happen.
And you've been doing all the right things. And so God's blessing you with the right person.
Well,
I'm okay with saying that, because it's true. Because if we shelter our kids way too much, look, I totally get it. Not to mention, did you have anything familiar to you? Like, how was your upbringing and your parents' relationship? Did anything, you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't want to say your parents were abusive by any means, but sometimes we can see the relationship that they had later on in life. We can go, oh, no wonder I chose a man like that, because it seemed familiar.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily have the similarities.
Okay.
But what I will say is that the idea of marriage being this like achievement, which is very much a thing in Christian community, that was like the highest level of achievement.
I know.
And so, like, just to give an example, I didn't go to college
Okay.
and I was ready to go to college. Like I had applied, I had gotten in, I had picked my classes,
Okay.
and I did not want to go to college. I was like very much not looking forward to it. It wasn't something that I really felt would be good for me. And
Okay.
so 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, I pulled out. And the way that my dad justified it at the time was, it's okay because you're going to get married and be taken care of by a man. So like
Oh,
you don't
okay.
have to go to college. Like
Okay.
he wanted me to. And this was his like him in his mind
Yeah.
justifying it. Like he was doing the best he could. I don't blame him for that, but
Right,
that is something
exactly.
that's like,
Yeah.
okay, that is the rhetoric that we're
Yeah.
being told over and over again. Like marriage is achievement,
Right.
and then motherhood is the next achievement.
Yes.
And you are a different level of woman once you reach those achievements within that community. And so I was running towards that.
Yeah.
Um, and now, so I went through that. I
Hmm.
totally lost myself.
Yeah.
And I started to question everything. I was like, if this isn't true, well, maybe that's not true. Or,
Oh,
if this happened,
gosh.
then that could happen. And so everything was kind of a question in my mind of like, well, now the world is a very different place than I thought it was. And, that is me coming out of my bubble. And that's okay.
It
But
is.
ultimately, where I moved with this podcast was having this revelation eventually that we all have moments in our lives
Yeah.
that make us stop and do a 180 or make us stop and say, oh my gosh, that has changed everything I thought that I knew.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be trauma, but we all experience life. So we all go through that.
Yeah.
And so that was where the idea for the podcast really came to be was, what are those stories in our lives that have really shaped our perspectives
Hmm.
and our priorities and our principles? How do we see the world through those lenses? And how do they make us more compassionate people? Because through my own experience of domestic violence, now I have a vein of empathy that I would not have
Yes.
access to outside of that. And
Hmm.
that is not to say that it's justified in any way, because it's not,
Right.
but it's there. And like you've already alluded to, there is a community
Yeah.
within that. And yeah, it sucks that you have to be a part of the community, but the
Right.
community itself is robust and beautiful because it is made up of people that
Mhm.
know what it is to survive.
It's so true. And I love that because I'm finding the most amazing people and I'm learning from everybody, because there's only so much to me that I can learn from a book but talking to other people, also not feeling alone, but people saying, oh, well, okay, don't forget that you should try this. I had friends going, okay, well, don't forget. Yes, therapy is great. Now try, meditation, try exercise, try these kinds of things, those kinds of things to help us understand ourselves better, what will work for you, what won't. And it's been such a blessing to me in that regard. No, it's never justified. I never want to say that I'm glad I went through it. Never. But I am going to turn my pain into purpose. And that's the end of the
Mm.
story because that's how I felt. And, tell me when you left after that, it sounds like you started like you're questioning everything and whatever, but did you feel like you started to get some clarity too on who you were as a person and what you wanted to do with your life and things like that?
Oh, eventually.
Yeah.
Yes. I went through a really dark time because I did have that part of the community that I grew up in kind of telling me that I had done the wrong thing.
Okay.
And, growing up, hearing that divorce was not an option,
Hmm.
I mean, those literal words are said,
Yeah.
it really does a number on you when you find
Yeah.
yourself divorced. and
Yes.
and when you realize that, okay, I did the one thing that I was never supposed to do.
Right.
And like there is still a large part of the population that doesn't believe if you don't have a bruise or
Yeah.
a scar that everyone can see that it didn't happen. And I mean, that is just based in ignorance.
It is.
And so, I'm at a place now where I can recognize that. But at the time, I was so afraid. I was afraid
Yeah.
of being judged, not just by people, but by God. Like,
Yeah.
is this going to be the thing that breaks me away from God? And it was
Right.
something that I genuinely struggled with. I mean, I know to people that didn't grow up in this, that sounds kind of silly, but I genuinely struggled with, is this going to separate me
Right.
from God? And I came to this point where I was like, well, if it does, I don't care, because I can't keep doing this. And that was one of my first, like, hold up.
Right.
That is crazy. What? Like, I
Right.
never thought I would be there. And then to kind of explore that and explore, does God really hold this against me? I mean, with everything happening in the world, with what was done to me, does God hold this against me?
Right.
And I, of course, came to the conclusion that no, he does not.
Right.
But in the moment, in those moments, it was excruciating. And so making a conscious decision to step away from something that you still are having trouble reconciling as right or wrong is really hard. And so I think that did the most damage to myself. I am not that person at all anymore, and I have done a lot of work to not be that person anymore and to heal. And so I'm very excited about life, because there is so much. What it did is it cracked things wide open. And instead of trying to stuff it back into a box that I was living in, I just embraced the open. And so there is a lot of stuff that I'm just like, you know what? Anything's possible. And I'm good with that. And it's actually a super liberating feeling.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I can relate so much. And I'm sure that other people can too. And it's like, here you are having grown up in it and going, is this what's going to, that God's going to just say, no more. I don't want her anymore. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When there's scripture that tells us that he would never do that. But still, sadly, when we're in it and we have people around us in the church who we trust saying differently, saying, unless he's hitting you, God's not going to be okay with divorce and all this stuff. And it's like, just research it. And there's so many resources, and I'll put some resources in the show notes too, because there are people who are talking about this, because we are worrying about women. Okay, so this is something I heard, is that we're worrying, or we're holding the institution of marriage in higher regard than the people inside of it.
Yes, exactly.
And
exactly.
in that kind of thing. Oh, I don't know how many times, even sitting in a Christian divorce group and them saying, God hates divorce. And I'm like, okay, does he hate abuse? Because he
Let's
sure does.
start with that. Yeah,
he sure does. But then you're also going through that whole thing, like you just said, that people don't necessarily believe it was abuse. You have all that rhetoric everywhere. And so it's not just in the church, it's in other places, and what we're thinking and what people think it is abuse, it's not abuse. And that's been hard. I've been unraveling all those things. And I love that idea of it cracked it wide open and you embrace that. And I love it, because I did the same thing. I was like, this is like pressing up against everything I've understood. And I'm going to untangle it, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to ask God about it. And I'm going to try and find the information from trusted professionals who are Christians and who are talking about this from a different perspective than just the one narrative forever and ever, because nothing's going to separate you from the love of God. Like, Jennifer, oh, sorry, you're divorced. Oh, God can't do anything with that. It's like, no, he's a little bigger than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Truly.
Are you feeling trapped in a relationship that leaves you questioning your worth and sanity? Have you noticed the red flags and decided you can't live one more day in a toxic environment? Whether you've just left or are considering leaving a narcissistic partner, the book, Married to a Nice Guy, Getting Over Narcissistic Abuse, is here to guide and support you.
In this candid memoir, I share my 33-year struggle in a marriage to a nice guy that was marked by emotional manipulation and abuse, revealing how I broke free and reclaimed my life. If you've been waiting for a sign, this book is it. If you've ever felt isolated, confused, or hopeless in your relationship, Married to a Nice Guy, Getting Over Narcissistic Abuse offers the understanding and guidance you need to break free and start your journey to healing. You are not alone, and you deserve a life filled with love, respect, and happiness. Order your copy today and take the first step towards reclaiming your life.
It's wild to me now, like thinking about it. And I've said this before because obviously it's part of my story, but I cringe a little bit when I talk about it because I'm like, it's ridiculous. It truly is. But you can't know what being in that frame of mind is like unless you're there.
Yes.
But I agree. Institutions are upheld so greatly. And I just believe that is completely backwards. And institutions across the board, not just the institution of marriage, but institutions across the board, people will always matter more than they will. So
yes, always. And that's what we need to be looking at. And not just to sit here and put blame, but one of the conversations I had before was that, okay, so there's so many things, but in society as well, little girls, right? We're taught how to be quiet and be good and all this, and, don't ruffle any feathers, don't make any waves. And otherwise you're going to be called a bitch or something, or, oh, she's trouble. Those kinds of things. Like, okay, but this is how little girls who are always being quiet and being good end up in abusive marriages. Because you're like, oh, this is what I've been working for. I've been being good all my life to get to a person who was going to be whatever, my knight in shining armor. Because, that's also part of the rhetoric as well, or the fairy tale or whatever. And these are all red flags. I've talked about it on many episodes. So feel free to just go back and listen to all the episodes or look at some of my social media. The thing is that that's the red flag. Like you were saying, for me, we rushed into our marriage. Like we ran down the aisle. Like we couldn't get there fast enough. And that's a red flag because that's one of the things they want to do before the mask starts falling off, because he's so great and everything's so great. To this day, people say he's so great. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm making an entire career out of talking about how some people are so great. Well, I'm not talking about just him, but I mean, that's from my perspective, and so when we're not able to talk about things like this, then little girls or teenagers or whatever aren't going to hear the red flags and like, God, you're don't be in a hurry. Everybody slow down.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is systemic and immediate for young girls. Yeah. And it's so sad. There are people that are doing better and I see change.
Yes.
But I also see the resistance to that change as well. And truly what it is a resistance to the empowerment of women.
Yes.
And it is about control and manipulation. It is not about tradition. It is not about, biblical values. It's not about that. It is about control and manipulation, because uplifting women and empowering women is just about uplifting literally half of God's creation.
It's so true. And you will see that in many religious organizations where it's a problem. Be quiet, everybody be quiet. It's like, and I had just seen this posted. I hope I don't get it wrong when I'm thinking about it, because it's around Easter time that we're talking. And it's like the first people who announced Jesus, right? Were women. If it wasn't for the women announcing the news, and that's the thing, is that women are such storytellers, and when we're left out of conversations, things happen. And that is also why, if you can uplift the women, like, societies will change, things will change, life will change. But that doesn't always feel good for men who are not secure in themselves. And I'm not talking about being anything but equal with people. You know what I mean? Like, Anyway, that's a really big conversation that
I know. I feel like we've crept into like
we
these little
did.
territories
That's
that it's like,
okay. That's okay. Well, the thing is, it's important because I've had conversations about this, and it makes me sad. I was very surprised, just being in my own church community, you know, going through divorce group in a church, and going like, I just feel like we're off somewhere. Like I was abused. I'm not the issue because I'm sitting in the divorce group trying to heal, and I felt like crap. And the girls, I call them girls because they were pretty young. The girls that are around me that were with me that I still am friends with, they felt the same way. They're like, yeah, I wasn't feeling that great when I left there. Like, we shouldn't feel worse
right.
when we're the ones in the group trying to heal. And so that's the biggest thing is, so I just, want to encourage people, where are you having your conversations, and listening to stories, and try and get different perspectives, because it's not just one place, right? It just can't be from one place. So tell me some things that you did to heal that were helpful to you.
I ran away to Europe for a little bit.
I love that. Wait, what did you do there?
I worked with an organization that I have been involved with since before I was married. And honestly, like, I'm so glad for the time that I was there, because I don't know what I would have done with myself if I hadn't done it.
Yeah.
But I was nowhere ready to be in the position that I was in, and working in the capacity that I was, because I was not okay. But that was the first thing I did. I did a lot of talk therapy, which did help. Talk therapy does not work for everybody. And so this is just my little PSA. If you're trying talk therapy and it's not working, maybe switch to another modality. Don't just give up on therapy in general.
Yes.
One of the things that was really healing for me is that I became a domestic violence advocate. So I live in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is, this was true when I did the advocacy course, which was like 8 years ago. So it may be a little bit different now, but Pennsylvania at the time was one of 2 states where, in order for domestic violence centers to receive funding, all client-facing volunteers had to go through this advocacy training. And it was in-person classes, online classes, and a practicum. And so I did that, and it was incredibly, incredibly healing for me personally, because it was just another validation of what I had been through, seeing in literal textbooks the things that I had been through, and that I was questioning in my mind, like, did this happen? Was this really, or am I like stretching it? And then I would read in this textbook, this is what it was. I will never forget learning about PTSD, like the clinical, what is happening to your brain when you get triggered with PTSD, and feeling this like, okay, I am not a crazy person. Because more than anything, that's what I felt like. I felt like I was just so insane, that I was not only nobody had been through it, which I know is categorically untrue. I mean, like, I wasn't that out of touch, but feeling so alone in the experience itself, but then also feeling so alone in my reaction to it. Feeling like, okay, other people have been through this and they're stronger. Other people have been through this and they're healing faster. And, coming to the realization that healing isn't linear, and that it is really, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back is okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So really going through that training was such a cathartic thing for me personally. And then in 2020 was when I really, of course, the best year to decide this, but 2020 is when I really decided that I wanted to change my life completely. And it's kind of the beginnings of the podcast project and everything like that. And it was really just coming to this realization that what was I waiting for was really where I was at. I had achieved some personal goals in my life, but I was living as though I was waiting for something to happen to me. I was waiting for like to get married again or to have a family.
Yes.
And so I realized, like, why? That's not
Right.
even something that I'm like actively pursuing. Why am I waiting for it?
Yeah.
And so I decided that I wanted to start traveling, and I wanted to start this project where I was interviewing people about their stories. And
That's amazing.
it really didn't get off the ground until 2022, but there was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, a lot of stuff happening internally. And I have to tell you, the past few years of my life have been the best of my adult life. And I am so proud of myself because I did the work to get here.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I love that whole journey. I love that. In 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. 2020.
Such a good time to decide you want to travel for.
Right, exactly. Well, it was a good year to change your life, that's for sure. That
True.
I changed my life. I mean, it kind of happened because of 2020, I decided to retire from being a speech therapist and do other things, and then my marriage fell apart and all the fun stuff, but then my life did change. And so that was the whole thing, and it's so interesting. But I just love that whole journey of that you ran away and you're like, I shouldn't have done that. But that's okay. I love it because it doesn't have to be perfect. And I so agree with the what are you waiting for? Really, like, what are we waiting for? And also, what are we waiting for to be happy? Because every once in a while I would get thoughts and I'd be like, oh, if only I had somebody. Because my son would say to me, Mom, I just want you to be happy. But what he was meaning was, I want you to find somebody because Dad found somebody. So I want you to find somebody. So then you'll be happy. And I am happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Believe me. But it's part of the narrative, it's part of the rhetoric, right? And so I like that. You were kind of questioning that, going, wait, why am I saying those things? I don't have to have a baby to be happy. I don't have to do those things. I can be happy right now, right this second. So
it's hard. It is a hard thing to get past because even now, I don't struggle with my decisions, but I do sometimes struggle with people are genuinely confused of how I can be happy with my life and the decisions that I've made. And there are people that are literally waiting for me to settle down, get married, have kids, whatever. And so, I don't say that I'm against that. I say I'm open to pretty much anything, but like, I'm not looking for that. I'm not actively like, well, by age, whatever, I want to be remarried and, start working on a family. I'm good. If that never happens, I am fine. I'm more than fine. And so it's hard when you have done a lot of work to come to a point in your life that you are satisfied with and you are content, and that other people are just really like not disappointed, but they really don't understand. And they're like kind of skeptical of your happiness, which is such a weird place to be in. But
well, I wonder if they're curious, like, how is somebody happy without anybody else? Well, because that's what the narrative we've been brought up to believe, right? And I remember the first time my dad came over to my condo, he's like looking around, he's like, this is better. And I'm like, better than being in a loveless marriage and being abused? Yes. And he doesn't know what to do with me, the poor man, he's probably like, what did she just say? But he doesn't understand. I know he just wants me to make sure that I'm okay, right? But him going like, this is better?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what people don't understand. You don't understand. It is better. I could be living in a ditch right now. It'd be better, because people just don't understand that. But it is that whole thing. Now, it took a lot of years for me to get to that point. And I'm sure you too, thinking like, I'm going to be happy on my own and living the life I want to live. And then that way, and then frankly, you're going to attract the right kind of person to come into your life after that.
Well, that's
the right
true
kind, the right kind of person. Because you have a full life. Okay, how about somebody else? You're not waiting for somebody to complete you. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And I mean, I'm sad that I'm 57 and I don't have anybody. But then other times I'm like, yeah, but there's such freedom in what I get to choose now. I'm not looking to start a family. I'm not looking for those kinds of things. So now I have a freedom and I want to just go out and enjoy life. And if somebody wants to come along, they can come along,
Yeah.
but we don't have to wait for that. It's just a lot of the narrative that's around us. Oh my goodness. And I so agree too with if it's not just talk therapy, because I did talk I do still talk therapy, but then I've also done other things because coaching, I'm doing coaching because
Mm.
and then also sometimes therapists, if they're not trauma informed, they don't completely understand because
Yes.
it is a trauma and it's complex PTSD. So if you've been through child abuse, domestic abuse, things like that, it's a complex PTSD that you're going through. And so you have to have the right kind of person talking to you because sometimes they don't understand. They almost are like, what's the big deal? I mean, when I was
Yeah.
in marriage counseling, I always tell this story, but I'm going to say it one more time because it's ridiculous.
Tell
But
it.
my marriage counselor told me that he was very handsome. What did I have to complain about? And so that's a person that doesn't understand. Yes, but
Yeah.
but that's
Big time.
but that's domestic abuse. If you really think you're being abused, you can't take them to marriage counseling because there's a control, a power struggle with control, because they usually will even fool the trained therapist unless they're
Yeah.
really trained in narcissism. Clearly, this one wasn't because she didn't.
Well, I
She
have
didn't
to
know.
say, I have to piggyback on you because I was very fortunate. We did marriage counseling for a while, and our counselor got upset with him in our couple sessions.
Wow.
But after a while, I started to go to her individually, and it
Yeah.
was genuinely because I thought that I was doing something wrong. I thought
Yeah.
I was broken because I was like, oh my gosh, he's doing therapy. It took forever to get him to therapy.
Of course.
Um, he's doing therapy, like he's doing all the right things. And like, I am still such a terrible wife. Like, what's wrong with me? And so he full out knew I was doing this because that's where I was at. And so
Yeah.
I talked to her our first session. She brought out the power and control wheel, which, if you're not familiar, is a wheel that has like eight different sections on it, maybe more. And it
Okay.
just goes through what different types of abuse, like different things that are
Oh.
abusive. And
Oh.
she handed it to me. I'd never seen this before in my life. She handed it to me and she said, does any of this resonate with you? And I picked out more than half the wheel.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
from that moment on, our sessions became my safety planning. And so,
Wow.
it
Okay.
wasn't that long before I did end up leaving,
Yeah.
but it is really true. And it's so unfortunate because you don't know until you're already in it, but a therapist can really make or break where
They
you
really
are.
can. And I never had that conversation though. I don't know why. And I'm not going to go back to my other therapist and be like, hello, like, why didn't you see this? Because who knows why they didn't, or maybe they didn't want to say anything. I have no idea. But my current therapist, my individual, so I had a different one compared to the marriage one. And I would, at some point, I said, well, I'm going to leave him, because she would keep reminding me, yeah, you've been infinitely clear with him what you need.
Mm.
So if you want to keep reminding him, you can, but just remember you have done that. And I'm thinking, yeah, I've been doing this for 32 years. Like, how many more times do I need to say, like, this is what I need from you? And you still go, well, I just don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get it. What do you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like they always act like, what? It's so confusing. It's really confusing, like what these basic wants and needs that you want. And so, the average time that it takes somebody to leave an abusive marriage or an abusive relationship is 7 times that they
Mhm.
try to leave. That's the average. And so like I would see her once a month and be like, okay, well, I was going to leave, but I didn't. I even asked a friend, can I go live with you for a week? So that, kind of send a message. And now looking at different things that I look on my Instagram or whatever, if you have to give somebody, like if you have to move out to cause an ultimatum like that, do they even really care? And I'm thinking, I was 32 years in. Would he have cared? I don't think he would have
Mm.
cared. You know what I mean? And so it's not unusual to, kind of waver and be like, oh my gosh, I wish somebody would have shown me things, but I think I saw it when I was supposed to see it. Because
Yeah.
I have friends, we went through codependency classes and she's like, we talked all about narcissism. I go, we did? I don't remember any of it. Because
It's so true. You
I
have
would
to
have
be in the
said,
place.
yes, I
Yeah.
think so. And I think I would have said, I think I wouldn't have realized. I don't know. I really feel like when it's time for you to see something, you see it.
Yep.
Otherwise, you just don't. I wasn't ready, apparently.
Yeah. It's hard. It's really difficult. So I don't begrudge anybody the time it takes them
Yes,
to leave.
exactly. Yes. No, it's true because some people go like, I figured it out after a month. I'm like, well, it took me 29 years before I noticed something was amiss.
That's okay.
I know.
It's not your fault.
It's not my fault. And I am totally okay with it. Like, frankly, I'm totally okay with it because I'm healed from that. So I'm good. I'm feeling good.
Good. I'm glad.
Things are good. And now I can help. I can help with other people. We can talk about this, and so I'm going to put some resources in the show notes about, your podcast and also domestic violence stuff and whatever else that we talked about in there so that people can reach out and whatever. So where can everybody find you and your podcast?
My website is probably the best because it has access to everything else.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's thehxpod.com. I don't think I said this yet, but one of the biggest things that I do for my podcast, which is a little bit unique, is that I interview all of my guests in person. So I travel around the world to interview my guests, which has been such a huge healing journey for me.
Yeah.
There's parts of it that are very it is a very intentional choice. There are parts of it that are super selfish in that I get to travel. So I'm not mad about it, but it is a very intentional choice for me. And sitting and bearing witness to people telling their stories is such an important part of listening. And it is just something that I can do to kind of bridge that gap. And I have so much respect for anybody that is telling and listening to stories. So however you do it is fabulous. I am not saying that my way is better, but that is how I've chosen to do it. And so I'm really excited about it.
That's really cool. So if you ever interview me, then I'll move to Paris or something. So we have to go there.
Oh, great. Well, I am going to interview you. So you let me know what your timeline is on that.
Well, I already
Vegas
went to
is
Paris.
fine.
I know Vegas will be good. No, and they have the cutest studios here. I've already done one interview in a studio, so they have really cute little things that there's places that we can chat. So.
Perfect. Love it.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, thank you so much for telling your story and for all you're doing for helping others and really turning your pain into purpose. I just love that. I really appreciate that. And I just, I don't know, I just wish you nothing but the best with everything you're doing because you're just a delightful person. It just makes me, it makes me kind of sad, when people have gone through this, but I love to see where you are now on the other side. And it's great, right? Doesn't it feel so good? Like even thinking back, I'm like, oh, I want to hug that poor, little Laura, I want to hug her and be like, it's going to be okay, but it's great to see that we can be on the other side and help others to get there too. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. I've enjoyed
good.
talking
I'm so
to you.
glad. And guys, if anything resonated with you today, will you please go to social media and leave us a comment? And also, of course, leave us a review on Apple and Spotify and go check out Jennifer's podcast. Everything is in the show notes. Thanks again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on the That's Where I'm At podcast. Did the story today resonate with you? Do you think others would benefit from hearing the stories we are telling? Please go to Apple or Spotify right now to leave a review so everyone in podcast land will know you love the show. We want to continue sharing stories of hope and healing. I'll be back next time. I'll talk to you then.